Today, I want to come to you with a message about resiliency and growth mindset. Recently, I returned from a trip that I took to Benin, Togo, and Nigeria in West Africa. And one of the places that I visited and I learned more about history of chattel slavery was on the shores in Benin. And one of the areas that I visited was a mass grave that held the bodies of enslaved people who were deemed too sick, not well enough, not strong enough to make it across the Atlantic. So they were taken, their bodies were thrown into a mass grave and they were buried alive. And I remember standing there at that particular monument, and the types of feelings that I felt were just incredible. From everything from incredible grief, sadness, anger, to also a sense of confidence and pride, and a bit of a roar came up in me, meaning if if anybody could have withstood everything that the people had to endure just to even get to a mass grave and be thrown in, the level of strength, the level of resilience it took from being in war to become enslaved, to being sold, to being branded, to being put into dark rooms to try to prepare them to make this trip, to all of the sands and road and the sands and ground they had to walk to even get to this point. Anybody who had even made it to the mass grave was an incredibly strong person. And then for those who were deemed strong enough and well enough to make it across the Atlantic, for them to make it across the Atlantic, to come to this country, to go to the countries they wound up in, and for them to have ancestors living today, like me, to me, the level of strength is almost unfathomable, like superhuman. But the truth is, it's something that's within us, and it's called resiliency. It's called having a growth mindset. And what I mean by that is that right here, right now, for you, the viewer, for me, we're not we may not be facing situations like my ancestors did. The situations we might be facing are being in a very tough political atmosphere. It might be that we are dealing with financial insecurity. It might be that we're dealing with illness. Maybe we are in a situation, though, like the enslaved, that's totally outside of our control. Maybe we're dealing with some unfair bullshit that we're going through right now. However, the choices that we do have, it's about being resilient. It is about how do we bloom where we are planted? I have this t shirt that says bloom where you are planted. And just recently, once I returned from the trip, I actually had to travel within the state, and I went to a women's prison here um, for an event, and I wore the t-shirt bloom where you are planted, and I wore that purposely because I wanted the women there to know that in spite of the fact that they are incarcerated, they still can bloom where they are planted. They can still pour into themselves so that once they are released, that they are able to build a life that they want. And if they do not have an out date, they can still build a life that has purpose and meaning even within the walls of a prison. And so I say that because this message has continued to flow from me, from being on the shores of West Africa to being inside a women's prison to being in the life that I live today. Resiliency. We're all going to have things that we're going to face. It's going to be outside of our control. There are going to be things that suck, things that we don't like, things that are really, really hard to deal with. Nonetheless, we can bloom where we are planted. And how do you do that? You have a growth mindset, meaning that no matter what the situation is, I can always find a way to use that situation to come up with creative ways to make it, creative ways to continue to bloom and blossom, even where I'm planted. Um, on my trip, I also went to the Nikkei Art Gallery. That's in Lekki, Nigeria. And I met the owner. Her name is Nikkei. And when I was in her art gallery, I saw this beautiful painting of her. And she had it commissioned on her 70th birthday. And there were 70 butterflies all around her. And I asked the tour guide, what did the butterflies mean? What was the meaning behind the painting? And the meaning was, despite everything, she still blossoms. And that is growth mindset. No matter what is going on in your life, no matter what, you have a creativity, you have a mind, you can have a mindset that despite it all, you still blossom. You still blossom. Your story may be different from my story. Your story might be different from the enslaved people, the ancestors who left the shores of West Africa never to for their bodies to return. Your story might be different from Nikkei's, from the art gallery owner. At the end of the day, what are you going to do about your situation? How can you have growth mindset and come up with creative ways that despite it all, you still blossom? Or like my t-shirt says, to bloom where you are planted. That is the message that's been on my heart. I wanted to share that. And if you have any questions, if you are interested in connecting with me, if you want coaching, leave a comment below. Contact me. If you haven't liked or subscribed to the channel, please do that. It encourages me to keep making more videos. All right, have an amazing day and be well.